Yo, what's up guys? I'm Niek from Producer School, and in this video we're exploring the groovy yet simplistic magic of PAWSA's latest Beatport #1 hit, Too Cool To Be Careless. Known for his groovy bass lines and his punchy drums, PAWSA's tracks have a way to get under your skin and make you move without even realizing it. PAWSA's mastery in creating energetic tracks while keeping a lot of simplicity in it is what keeps his music on top, and today I'm going to demonstrate how you can keep that essence into your own music. I will break down the key elements of the track, such as the bass and the drums, and I will show you how you can achieve the simplicity that his tracks are known for. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to never miss out on a new video, and now let's dive straight into the video. Okay, so I'm here in FL Studio, and the first thing you want to do is set your project to 128 BPM, which is the typical kind of minimal house BPM that PAWSA often uses. And from there, immediately move on to the first vital element of this track, which is the bass guitar. I came up with a funky bass MIDI, which right now is playing in a piano, and it sounds like this. As you can see, there are quite some funky jumps in this. For example, here it goes from a D to a C and back to a D real quick, which really contributes to that typical kind of PAWSA groove. And the same goes for this really fast switch in octaves and in notes. And when you will hear it in the bass guitar, it will immediately make more sense. So for the bass guitar, you can simply use a boo bass, which is a stock plugin from FL Studio, and simply boost some of the bass frequencies to make it a bit more prominent. And without processing, it now sounds like this, which sounds a bit corny still, but processing will really do a lot on this one. And now you can immediately hear these little switches, really like a groovy touch to it. For the processing, I first want to add a decapitator with like a drive of 3, just in the normal style, which will add a bit more grit to the sound. But you don't want to destroy those bass frequencies, so be a bit careful with it. Next, you want a bit more focus on the low, mid, bass and sub area. So for that, you can do quite a steep high cut, and that completely erases like the high, mid and treble frequencies that were in it. The sound lacks some body, so a sound goodizer, which is basically just a multiband compressor for lazy people, really beefs up this sound, and then it sounds like this. And last but not least, a sidechain, because we don't want it to clash with the kick later on. If you want even better bass guitar samples, you could also look into, for example, Contact, which really has the high-end bass guitar plugins. However, Boo Bass is just sounding really close to what it's supposed to sound. And it's just a stock plugin, which makes it very accessible for any of you guys. And now let's move on to the next sound, which is this really short and snappy pluck, which we're going to use to create a top melody, or maybe even some top chords. So it sounds like this. Really straightforward. It's basically a square wave here with some PWM modulation. It's a mini saw wave on oscillator B, both just one voice of unison, because we want to keep a bit of that analog touch. So we do the detuning through this fine tune setting right here. So -6 and 11 to create a slight detune on the sound. And as you can see, envelope 1 is shaped really shortly with quite some release, and that just gives you that really snappy sound. And then envelope 1 is also linked to the PWM modulation, as well as an MG-Low 24 filter. Lastly, I also added some Juno 106 noise, which is also linked through the filter. Then some soft clipping and a little bit of chorus, and the rest of the effects I will just do in the post-processing part. But first of all, let's come up with a top melody on the bass guitar. We're going to create chords, but they do not necessarily have to correspond to the bass line. So for example, here, this already works, even though the bass line is on a D. A F major chord tends to work. So now we're going to get that into a nice groovy rhythm. This seems to work already. So this kind of rhythm where you first just have the bass and then this kind of top melody comes in is very similar to the one that PAWSA used in that track. So together it really complements each other. Now let's copy it to the rest of the bass line to see if it works on everything. So this is really simple and it just adds that little extra. For me, it's easier to start with that like funky bass because you get a real feeling of where you want to go real quick, and then those notes you chose already limit you to some kind of set of chords you can use, because you can't use anything that will sound good on the key of that bass. So for me, this order works the best, but for some people it might be easier to first come up with like a little chord scheme and then create the bass. So that's totally up to you. For me, this just works the best. So first of all, add a low cut and a slight boost to the highs, because you really don't need those low frequencies. And then I wanted to add a vintage chorus just to make that sound a little bit more vintage. And this is inspired by the Uno, which is known for having a really warm sounding vintage chorus. So just on mode 1 with the mix to like 50% adds a bit of that warmth to the sound which you're looking for. Then again, a bit of decapitator to add some grit to the sound and some sidechaining. And in this case, I really want to keep it short, really snappy. So I decided to not use any delay or reverb, as this just sounded like the closest to the original that I could get. So these are actually already the two main elements of the track, also with a vocal later on. So now let's move on to the drums. So the drums will really make clear on the simplicity of PAWSA's sound. So first of all, I have this kick drum from our Dimension pack. And once again, added a bit of drive on decapitator, just because I really know that PAWSA likes to use those like thumpy, distorted kicks. So together with the bass, that sounds like this. Really punchy and thumpy kick. So let's copy it to the rest of our track we have so far, and now move on to the next element, which will be the clap and the snare. For the clap and the snare, I chose two samples from our Omnia pack, which is actually not even a house pack, but more a modern dance and fret again kind of thing. But I really wanted to get a kind of garage snare like this, layered with the highs of a clap. Also, no reverb on it, just a really tight sound. Next, we want to create a loop with a closed head, and in this case I found this closed head from our pack Devotion, which is a bit longer than like usual closed heads. And then you want to play it in a 1/8 rhythm, so like this. Simply add it back on top of the rest of your drums right here, and it will immediately make quite a difference to the drums. It's quite literally essential for the groove of this track. Next, I added this little shaker loop. And the trick for this is I added a transient processor, which I brought down the release quite a lot. like 50%. And when I bring it back, you will hear immediately that the sound becomes much like longer in terms of release. So together with the drums, that would sound like this, which doesn't sound bad. However, when you bring back the release, it will get really, really tight. And that's what I hear a lot in PAWSA's sound, is that he likes to really narrow down his transients, especially the release, to just get that very tight sounding sound. Very subtle difference, but it does really make a difference. Next, I added some vinyl noise, which is just a really straightforward sample. You almost barely hear it, but it just adds to that vintage sound of the drums. Together with the top lead and the bass line, you now already have the full bass layer of your track. So next up, I'm searching for a vocal which will fit on this bass line right here. And it should just be like a very housey vocal, either female or male. So I found this loop on Splice and it sounds like this.
Come bring me your fire, I need your desire.
It wasn't a wet vocal, so a bit of delay on ping pong mode to make it a bit more wide. Really tiny bit of reverb with the wet level just to 20%, and a low cut will make this sound much better. And let's now see how that sounds in the context of the project.
Come bring me your fire, I need your desire.
Now I also want to search for something like an ad-lib to put in between. It can just be like a scream or something going on, just to fill up the voids between this vocal. So I found this vocal and I routed it through the exact same mixer bus. So this works really well in front of the drop parts of the track. And then we also want to have like a little fill that we can use in front of the drop. In this case, just a standard snare fill. I will now continue with the arrangement and then get back to you and explain you the full arrangement. So here's the full arrangement, and as you can see, it was just a matter of erasing and adding elements back in. As this style is so simple, the key is really to create contrast between various parts of your track. So this is the intro, and it just has all the elements except the vocal, and you immediately hear like, okay, there's like this groovy kind of vibe going on. And then you come to a part where the kick is basically erased and there is a low pass filter on the bass guitar. And then you get a sound like this, which is more of a break kind of sound.
Come bring me your fire, come bring me your fire.
And then here also the bass is erased, so you just have the drums and the vocal, which will create even more contrast between the drop, which will start playing later on.
Come bring me your fire.
But it still sounds really tight somehow, even though you just have like 6 elements going on. Then there's this kick, which is introduced once again.
Come bring me your fire,
and a little pre-drop part.
I need your desire.
Without even a top melody playing, just the groove of the drums and the bass line. Then here you have basically a similar part once again, and we introduced the pre-drop vocal as well as some new elements which I will immediately show you. First one is this top guitar lead. And it's a standard instrument which you can find in your FL Studio browser under Instruments, Guitar, and then the slap guitar. And for this I added a full chain of effects to really spice up this guitar. So first of all, this EQ, roll off some of the low end and add some high boost. And some decapitator in this case to just add that grit back into a guitar, make it a bit more prominent. Some vintage chorus, basically the same as I did previously, but this time in the second mode, which sounds a little bit different. Then this Phase Mistress on a guitar preset, which just adds a bit of that wah-wah effect. A short slap delay and some reverb and a kickstart on 60%. Of course, this would sound much better if you really record it, but in this case, I will show you that you can get quite a nice sound with just using this, which is also available in FL. Really sounds like this funky top guitar. And then I'm using the same guitar, however with another funky melody on top of the drop, which sounds like this. So you add that all back into the drop together with a ambient sustained pad, which in this case just follows the key of the track, which is D minor. And then I added a really simple chorus synth from our back Resonate in Diva, which sounds like this. And this is all layered together in arrangement here. Also the vocal will start playing on top of the track with just adding, erasing, and kind of strategically placing certain elements. PAWSA really does a great job in creating the contrast and keeping it interesting while not making it complex at all. And that's it for this video about the style of PAWSA's new hit Too Cool To Be Careless. And the point of this video was mainly also really to show you that you can get awesome music without overthinking everything, especially these kind of house tracks. You can just keep it really simple if you make sure that the main groove and the main idea is strong. Of course, try to be original, but this is just a really nice demonstration of this fact. If you want to check out the sounds that I used in this video, which were mainly from our sample packs, head over to the link in the description, as we have all kind of packs, including packs for minimal and tech house. If you guys have any questions or suggestions, make sure to leave a comment down below. And for now, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I see you guys in our next video.